Woman is here. We've seen it. We have thoughts. Full spoilers. I'm Terry Schwartz. This is Joshua Yale. I really liked this movie. I just want to get it up front. I did the spoiler warning. I'm so happy to say I really liked Wonder Woman. What did you think, Joshua? You reviewed it for us.
I also really liked Wonder Woman.
It happened.
It finally happened. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was like perfect, and I wouldn't say it's great, but it has a lot going for it, and I really love Wonder Woman herself in the movie.
Yes, I agree. I think that this is my favorite DCEU movie to date. I also think that this is not a perfect movie, but I think the good in Wonder Woman really outshadows the bad for me, and we'll get into that a bit more during this conversation. But I think broad strokes, what works for me in the movie is Wonder Woman herself. I really liked Gal Gadot's portrayal. To me, my favorite scene in the movie is not anything at the end or even at the beginning. It's that scene in the middle when she walks up onto the battlefield, which we've seen in all the trailers. To me, that scene encapsulates sort of like the heart of what this movie is about. You agree? You're nodding.
I loved that. That was the best part of the movie and really did tie together everything we had seen up until that point and made for the most exciting stretch of the movie, and then really just like set the tone for the rest. And it was so good. It was so good.
And I think what's interesting is this movie does a good job of not shoving down your throat that Wonder Woman and the Amazonians, like it's sort of the mythology that is explained in this movie, they embody hope, especially in a time that they're fighting the literal embodiment of war. And to me, this movie is very hopeful. It's very light in a way that doesn't feel tonally off with necessarily the other movies in the DCU, even though they have been a bit darker. And I think that is its greatest strength. It's funny. We actually had interesting different screening experiences that sort of changed how we interpreted the humor. But in the screening I was in, like, every joke slayed. We couldn't even hear some of them, particularly the boat scene when she's talking about sort of like all the books that explain sexuality and intimacy. And she's like, yeah, we determined that, you know, we don't need men. That, like, you couldn't even hear that line because people were laughing so hard. So that was something that really sort of amplified the experience for me. But I think that whole idea of hope is really captured well. And even though I think the third act of the movie is where it stumbles a bit, I can forgive it for that because I think what worked really well.
Yeah, I really, just going back to that scene of the trenches, it's like she leaves paradise, like a literal paradise. Even when the camouflage thing, they go on the other side of that, it's like, yeah, this side's really great. This is great. So to go into this world of war, which she is very naive to, the idea of like moral gray areas and people not helping people, or like horses and stuff. And it really is that scene of her going and seeing like wounded people and wanting to stop and help people and being told no, no, no. And finally she decides, look, you're not going to tell me what to do. I'm going to go up there, and she essentially like lets them take that position, and it's so good.
I think, yeah, and the music coming through, I think I really liked Wonder Woman's theme from Batman v Superman. It's brought into play here. We said we wouldn't sing. But I think they did a good job of using restraint with that theme. It was worked into the score, but it was those moments when it did come through. It really popped. It really was impactful, and that's sort of like the moment you're hoping for her. Even though the world of man is not what she expected it was, that scene, I think, I don't know, it's such a triumphant scene for me. So
I know we're all like gushing because I really love her as Wonder Woman and the compassion and the love and everything, but her performance as Diana didn't quite win me over. She had her moments, but it really varied scene to scene to whether I think she really pulled it off, or I thought maybe they could have used another take or something like that, especially the scene where she's arguing with her mother, like those scenes after Steve shows up. I really just thought something was like missing from her. She didn't really kind of like go far enough with the scenes. She's like very like just winded and like, but this and that, and I was like, this isn't quite working for me. So yeah, but I will say once she does, do the Wonder Woman thing, I'm like totally on board. So I really love her as Wonder Woman. It's like perfect, it's like amazing, and I felt inspired by her as a true hero. No moral gray areas really, like we've seen in a lot of superhero movies, especially on the DCEU side. But into the Diana stuff, I could have used a little bit more.
It's interesting, that did not stick out to me, and I didn't really have an issue with Gal Gadot's portrayal of Diana versus Wonder Woman. I actually did like that she seemed so much younger and so much more naive in those scenes than sort of the framing device of this movie, which is her leave post-BVS is the implication I get because she's communicating with Bruce Wayne, but they're not like explicit about when that scene those scenes take place. I really did like the juxtaposition, and the caliber of her acting didn't really stand out to me as being poor there, because I thought that she was sort of too naive to the point that we're concerned for her when she's venturing into the world of man. And I think sort of even, when we have people like Antiope die, I thought that scene could have had a bit more weight to it. But I thought that the lightness of that part of the movie worked with her portrayal of Diana, particularly when she does get to London. And like all those scenes, especially with Etta Candy, like are so funny, and with Steve, like there's that dynamic there as she's learning the ropes, so to say. So that didn't really cause an issue for me.
I do hear her saying, I do really like the naivety part of it. Of she seemed like very innocent going into a world of war, but it was more just her delivery of lines that I thought didn't really quite get me. That how they should have, and some of the humor, and there weren't as many people in my screening, so maybe that was why, because usually people were like laughing and stuff, but maybe that's why the humor didn't seem to play as much. But her trying to go through the door, I was like, okay, I get what you're going for there, but I wasn't like, yeah, I love it when things slay. I was in the wrong screening, but no, yeah. So the sort of the awkward humor didn't always play for me, but I did find her like very charming and as Diana. But yeah, again, just certain scenes, certain moments, I was like, not quite getting it.
Well, I definitely want to know what you guys think about it, especially the humor of the movie, because for both of us, it is so much determined by the audience that you're seeing it with. So we definitely want to know, if the audience responded well, if that affected how you perceived the humor, the tone of the movie, or if you just loved it or hated it, regardless of what other people thought. I definitely agree with you. I loved Diana as a hero, Wonder Woman as a hero. I really felt inspired by her. The part of the movie I didn't feel as inspired by was the villain situation that they have. Interestingly enough, apparently casting sort of spoiled the David Thewlis Sir Patrick is Ares beforehand. I somehow missed this. So I went into this movie expecting Danny Houston to be Ares, and like never second guessed it up until the end when she killed him and nothing happened. I was like, that's sort of a lackluster fight, like to defeat Ares, and then he shows up and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess if you have David Thewlis in this movie, you are gonna make him the main villain. That being said, hate is a strong word. I strongly disliked the final battle scene because I thought it looked like a poor Injustice fight.
Right. Injustice actually looks better than that. It looks like a mid 2000s video game boss battle that wasn't rendered properly. And that's why I wanted to rate the movie higher than I did in my review, which you guys can check out on the site. But that really held it back. But like the messy CGI superhero battle is something that other superhero movies have struggled with. It's really hard to stick the landing, superhero landing, on a lot of these movies. And Wonder Woman doesn't quite do it. But I will say this: the emotional chords that are struck during the scene, like realizing what happened to Steve, and sort of
what he said to her.
Yes, oh my gosh, that was really well done.
I shed 2 tears in that scene, which does not happen very frequently. I totally agree with you. Yeah. I think there were very strong, emotionally impactful moments.
Yeah. So I was, which is why still at the end, I don't think the end ruins it, but it could have just been so much better. Then Ares again going into the boss mode, and she'll knock him down. He'll fly around, and it should be cool. He's creating his armor from. I actually did like the armor
he looks like a Dark Souls boss,
from the scraps of war and making swords, but it didn't look very refined, especially looking at something like Batman v Superman, which was, even if I didn't think that was a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, it looked great, and it was visually very sharp, and I was really impressed with it on the visual side. That's probably the only thing I could really champion about that movie. But for this, I just was like, ugh, what were they doing?
Yeah, I actually felt like this battle scene reminded me a lot of the showdown at the end of BVS a bit. I do think that the BVS final fight worked better than this one with Ares, but I just found it to be very forgettable. It sort of is a trope of this big fight. At least they learned to do it where there weren't a lot of people around, so they aren't destroying a city or something. thing. But I agree, the CGI just didn't look good. I wasn't really drawn into the fight in terms of the way they shot the action there, where I really liked a lot of the other action scenes in the movie. But I do think that the one thing that worked really well is the emotional through line, her connection to Steve and his sacrifice at the end of the movie when she realizes what he says, again, like really affected me. And I also think we should talk a little bit more, you know, about Dr. Poison and Ares and everything else as characters. But I think that the thematic concept of Ares in this movie worked a lot better than him as a character. And I don't know if you agree with that.
I do agree. He wasn't really... The fact that they made it a secret that he's Ares really didn't give him enough time to shine. And he's really just up there like loudly proclaiming things. And
Sir Patrick wasn't really a character before that. Like he appeared, he physically was a character, but he wasn't someone very developed or anything that you're like, oh, him. Yeah,
it's not like he had like a close bond to her, so that it became like a betrayal of some sorts. It was just sort of like, oh, here's the twist, it's coming. Yeah, and I will say that this is sort of going off topic a little bit, but the Diana is under the impression that all people are good men.
Right.
Like all the soldiers are good men.
I agree with what you're about to say.
But Ares is corrupting them. Yet she's like hacking them down and like killing them and stuff. And I'm like, wait, aren't they like innocent essentially? And so it actually created a really interesting moment because she kills Ludendorff, the general, and then she's really like disillusioned in a way of just like she thought that would put an end to the war, but really it turns out that this is the way men are, and that they will fight, and some men will be evil.
Which is an interesting lesson.
Yes, but then at the end it's like, oh nope, it actually was, and then she kills him, and then the Germans go and start hugging each other, and I was like, wait a second.
The Germans and the British. I agree with you, and especially like the idea that, and this is getting a little bit off topic, like you said, but you know, she thinks that she has resolved the war. Or resolve this issue, but we know as the audience, World War II takes place not too long after, and Ares is not around in that scenario, which goes back to the theme that man causes it themselves. But I am a little bit confused.
Assume.
Yeah, we assume that seems to be what they're trying to say in this movie. That Ares didn't need to do too much to incite this. He didn't need to control them. They had that inside them the whole time anyway.
And that brings us to.
Well, I quickly before we go over there. The thing that I think this movie didn't quite stick the landing on is explain why this seemingly was what prompted her to turn her back on man until the events of BVS.
Right.
Because unless there's a sequel that will take place in World War II or something that will further dig into it, which I sort of hope it isn't because it's not the same without Steve Trevor.
Right.
I think that that's something I did want to come out of this movie understanding a little bit more explicitly, and sort of felt like, I'm like, okay, well, I can assume she was disillusioned and blah, 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 but where did she go? What did she do?
Yeah.
Why really did she not help during all these other wars?
Right. I might need to watch it again, but I sort of assumed that like, oh, losing Steve and just seeing the ugliness of war, I think that may have been what made her step away from helping mankind as Wonder Woman, but they don't quite make it as clear in the movie yet. So it doesn't bridge to BVS that clearly. But in terms of Steve, you know, he could fall into the ice and get captured and then come back as the Trevor soldier with a metal arm and everything. So he could be around.
I think that Steve is for sure dead, even though
they didn't show it.
Even though they didn't show it, I think it was probably the right move to not show it because it was so emotional, his death anyway. Steve worked so well in this movie. I had my doubts going in, and you can disagree if you want to, but I thought that their dynamic, like in many ways, not to compare this movie overtly to Captain America, the First Avenger, but I thought he was her Peggy Carter to the extent that he worked as well as Peggy Carter did as a partner for Diana in this movie. And I thought Chris Pine really surprised me. Like, I really enjoy him as an actor, but I just thought that he was spot on in his depiction of Steve. And I like that, you know, there wasn't a lot of mansplaining or vice versa, a lot of like man shaming as like, oh, women can do everything. I thought they struck that balance and that tone really well with this, and that's a fine line to walk. I am very, very happy with their dynamic and their relationship.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I think this was actually Chris Pine's best blockbuster performance that he's ever given. Well, I think the only other one you can really compare it to is Star Trek, but I thought he just did such a good job. And it was such a weird line to walk of like, you're on this island of immortal Amazon women, but you're also in World War I, and trying to like be the guy to like ride the line between those two and like introduce her to our world and also like react appropriately to weird things on Themyscira. And I thought all that went so well. He was like super funny. But he also had like a world weariness of like a man who's seen too much war, but he's still like very charming despite that. And the way he sort of like handled Wonder Woman and sort of tried to like have her best interest at heart, but still try and show her like, look, this is a war we're going to, and so he really was he in a lot of ways he carried the movie forward and introduced this sort of weird hero character to the real world.
Yeah, I think my favorite scene that sort of embodies that is the scene when she is fighting with him and saying, no, it's Ares, I need to stop Ares, like I'm gonna run off, why did you stop me from killing Ludendorff, and all this stuff, and he pushes back and he's like, no, but like what if it's not, and then she goes off and they have this big fight, but then the second they see the smoke, there's no continuation of the fight. There's no resentment. I think he understands where she's coming from, and I think that's part of what he's really charmed about by her. So the second they see that smoke, he immediately jumps to help her. Right. And I like that there wasn't like a pettiness or resentment. A different movie could have had that there, and this didn't. And to me, that scene really captured what worked so well about their dynamic and having him as a partner for her.
Okay, let me ask you this. What do you think of their romance?
I thought it was actually pretty sexy. I liked it. And I have a fun fact. So the screening that I went to, Patty Jenkins, actually, the director, hung out a little bit afterwards, and I was talking with some of my friends who I saw it with, and we felt like there should have been a scene in the movie that was like sort of an awkward morning after scene or something. Like I thought that would be a funny joke to play. And so we asked her, we're like, was there a scene that was cut? And she was very emphatic that not only were there were no scenes cut from the movie, which she was very proud of, but she did say originally Steve was supposed to kiss Diana when they were out there dancing, but that when they were in the moment shooting it, she didn't like the way that played, and so she decided to not have them kiss then and wait until later when they were in the bedroom. But I thought that it was like really well done. They didn't need to show too much, but when they're staring at each other in the room and then he closes the door behind him and that's a choice, that I thought was like really hot. For all that they're like, no one is like grinding up against each other or taking their clothes off. Like I thought that choice for him where she clearly is asking him with her eyes, do you want to stay? I feel like I'm like writing a fan fiction right here. But
keep going. Where's the cocktails?
I like that. I thought that it was restrained in the right way, but like very hot.
I agree 100%. I'm a little heated.
I know. I'm like, oh my goodness, Joshua. Let's talk about the other characters real fast as well. Etta Candy, loved.
Loved her. She was not in the movie enough.
She was not in the movie enough.
Put her off to the side. They should have them go with her, and Diana should have been like, no, women can come and be on this with us.
But I thought every scene that she was in, she stole. Like
yes.
she hit the right beats with it. It would have been funny if she figured out Sir Patrick was Ares beforehand.
Yeah.
That one might have been like, hey, there's something off about him. I also think in terms of Charlie, Chief, and Samir, I liked them when they were on screen, but I found them a bit forgettable. Like you need characters like that to round out the movie, to give different perspectives. But when I think back on this movie, like they didn't leave that much of an impact on me. What about for you?
Charlie's the one who woke up at the fireplace, right? And I actually liked them. They weren't like super important to the plot, but when they were on screen, I found them very enjoyable and cool. And it really says a lot about Chris Pine's character, about Steve Trevor. Those are the kind of people he associates with. And I really enjoyed the fact that one of them woke up and was like really, he's having like PTSD essentially, having nightmares about the war. And I thought they added some extra, flavor to the war element. I was really into them.
Yeah, I mean, I did like that fireplace scene. I also liked Chief mentioning, oh, his people fought my people, and now I'm fighting with him, and like that sort of gives Diana some context. I think when I go back and watch and rewatch this movie, there's a lot of interesting thematic stuff about war and its impact that we can unpack that might not have stuck out as much on first viewing. But I do think that this was very much Diana and Steve's movie, and they're the two characters that I remember the most.
Yeah.
In terms of Wonder Woman as a standalone movie, a first sort of flashback, big solo character movie for the DCEU since Man of Steel, I really liked that this movie did stand on its own so much. It wasn't very concerned about tying into the rest of the DCEU, setting up what's to come. Instead, I think you could watch this movie and not see any of the other movies, and it makes a perfect amount of sense. How did you feel?
I agree as well. I think that was a strength and a very smart choice to not even have a post-credit scene.
Yeah.
To just
no
really,
shawarma.
Yeah, no shawarma or anything. Really just standing on its own and telling a really, really good Wonder Woman story, third act aside. And just not trying to like set things up and have like there's no talk of like mother boxes, which we were assuming is, we know that's going to be part of Justice League, and no like. I don't know what else you would have, but or like other ships or something like that from like Krypton, or like there could have been so much other stuff shoved in there, or meeting one of the Wayne's ancestors or something.
Right.
But just the fact that they really just did a really just pure 100% Wonder Woman movie, save for the opening and ending, which was just a flashback to set us up spinning out of BVS, really. And they didn't show Bruce Wayne. I thought he would have been at the end. And he wasn't, so I thought that was really smart.
I agree. I think that would have been a distraction. Also, I waited through the whole end of the movie for a post-credit scene, and then got confirmation that they weren't going to do like later that there won't be one. And I think that is so smart, because I think this movie ends on very much the right note, even though, like, where is Diana jumping to at the end of this? She's jumping somewhere. She's jumping into
another weird
League.
thing.
But I think that it would have distracted from sort of the right note that the movie ends on. It's very much a complete experience. And, we do a lot of sort of Easter egg unpacking here at IGN, and there weren't that many in this movie.
Yeah.
The closest I would call like an Easter egg is the fact that she's emailing with Bruce Wayne, right? And that he has sent her the photo, which is a clear connection to their relationship and dynamic in Batman v Superman. But I just thought it was it's rare to have a movie very much stand on its own. And actually, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was pretty standalone as well. And I think for all that I enjoy the way these cinematic universes do tie together, it's nice to have a movie just be a movie.
Yeah.
I am very excited. This makes me hopeful for the future DCEU slate. We have Justice League next. We'll see how that goes. But this is the first movie that Jeff Johns really took control of the DCEU. And I think if this is a sign of what's to come, I'm excited. I want to see more DCEU movies like Wonder Woman, not necessarily matching the same tone. We talked about how this is a lot lighter, but I think it is very sure of itself. Mm-hmm. It has a strong sense of self, of what it wants to be. It doesn't feel like a mishmash. It doesn't feel like something where someone came in at the last minute and said, oh no, we need to rejigger everything. Like, this feels like the movie they wanted to make, and I think as a Wonder Woman movie, or Wonder Woman story, it's a great story. It's a story that I'm glad we waited this long to see.
Yeah, and I thought it was really refreshing movie as well. I know we've seen like Captain America: The First Avenger took place in World War II, and it's another hero with a shield,
Right.
And wears
also
red
has
and
Steve in it.
Yeah, and wears red and blue and stuff. So, but I really thought that this movie made it, despite all that, and like even though Thor, he comes from a space city of weird, fantastical space city, and comes to to Earth, her story was so much more compelling, and it felt different regardless of going from paradise into a world consumed by war.
It had a lot of emotional weight too.
Yeah. And I think that can really be, if DC wants to find an identity, because Marvel has like, oh, these are going to be like funny, quirky, action, superhero adventure movies, essentially. But if DC can like really make the identity of what they did with Wonder Woman and carry that into their other movies, I think that's really smart, of taking like a hero clashing with like real world problems of real world like crises and stuff like that, and like pitting them against that, and shaking and really making them stay a hero throughout, despite, not let them become moral or like immoral and gray, as so many movies have. I think that would be like a really smart play for DC.
I'm hyped. I'm ready for more. For more on Wonder Woman, make sure to check out IGN's review, plus check out our exclusive interview with director Patty Jenkins. And make sure to like and subscribe to IGN on all your favorite platforms.